Can you see me if I sit down here? Oh, it's all good. Okay. Look at my tiny notes. I've got tiny notes. I can't hardly read them. Okay. I'm going to talk today about banquets and tables. And I have to start up. I'm actually going to be really upfront here and say that my week has been a bit hectic. And so yesterday the Lord was giving me this message, like a little bit at a time. And I thought to myself, fantastic, I've got the whole of Sunday, all good, plenty of time to sit in it. And, well, it didn't go the way I planned. But, Dave said to me, sometimes this actually does clarify part of the message when actually our lives are not just a series of speaking the stuff to you. We actually have to live it. And so I probably can't share all of it, but there were some things that came up this morning that really we felt we needed to respond to. And so our morning kind of got changed up a bit. And we got home and I was like, okay, God, I'm going to go with what I think you've given me. But it felt, before we left home, I felt really a bit, what's the word? Yes, that's a good word, anxious. I don't generally get anxious, but I felt a bit anxious. And it's not because I think you guys have any expectation on me that's unrealistic, but I think it's because sometimes the enemy goes, well, who do you think you are? You haven't even prepared a proper message. Those tiny little lies, we all get them. And so I'm being completely upfront and open and honest with you because I want you to know that actually to have sat in my room and spent hours and hours and hours preparing a message and missed out on the things that we were able to do would not have been right. And so I go, okay, God, where's the balance there? So I feel like he's given me a balance because he's good all the time. But I want to talk to you about banquets and tables. So yesterday, that first song we sang, you brought me to your banqueting table. Did anyone know that? Recognise that? Okay, a few people. Yeah, a few people. Okay. So it came to my mind. And I was like, Lord, what's that about? And it's all about, his banner over me is love is just a beautiful expression. It's from Song of Songs. And it talks about, it's a very small verse, but it talks about, you've welcomed me to your banqueting table and your banner over me is love. But it's such a beautiful image. It's such a beautiful image. And anyway, so that started me thinking. That came to mind. Actually, it might have been Friday. I can't remember. But anyway, it got me thinking. It triggered something in me. So I was like, okay, what's that about? Banqueting table. The table. There's something about being around a table. So I started just playing with the thought of it a bit. And the feasts and banquets. So in the Jewish culture, which I'm not very up on all this. There's lots of people in our world that are very into the Jewish culture and the Israeli stuff. But there's 7 feasts in the Jewish calendar, right? Actually, Brooke, you know all about this too, don't you? You probably could preach this message better than me, but that's... But I'm just going to list them off really quickly because I don't want to spend too much time on them, but I want to set it up so that we understand that actually feasts and banquets and tables are part of God's way, right? So one is Passover, which is remembering the deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt. The Feast of the Unleavened Bread, which is remembering the sudden escape from Egypt and the provision of bread after Passover. They actually had to leave Egypt so quickly that they didn't have time for their bread to rise, so they just had no yeast in it, which meant it was flat bread. But actually, I read, when I was reading about this, it said about matzah. And it took me back to this memory I had. This is so bizarre, but it took me back to this memory that I worked in a Jewish delicatessen when I was like 15. And I completely forgot about it until I read that word. And I was like, I love those things. I remember selling them and thinking, these are yum. Isn't that funny? It was a funny old thing to remember. Anyway, so unleavened bread, perfect. So then there's, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Shavuot? I'm looking at you. Yeah. So this is the Feast of Weeks' First Fruits, sacrificing the first part of their harvest in recognition that God was the giver of every good thing. This is good stuff, right? Just to even live our lives like this. spoke of dependence on God to provide. That is an everyday thing. An everyday thing. The Feast of Trumpets, thanksgiving for the end of the harvest and the anniversary of receiving the law. Jewish tradition, this is very interesting, was that true thankfulness to God was best shown by giving to other people. Isn't that a good thing, eh? Thankfulness to God was best shown by giving to others. Rosh Hashanah, Day of Atonement, beginning a new religious year, reminder of God's power and their call for faithfulness till his coming. Then Yom Kippur, national seeking of forgiveness, fasting and self-denial, repentance and confession of sin. And then the Feast of Tabernacles, remembering the Jewish people living in the wilderness for a long time, a lot longer than they needed to. I don't know if they actually say that in there. Before entering the Promised Land. So these 7 feasts are celebrated right throughout the year. And I'm sure that a lot of those, they're about banqueting as well. They're not just, they call them feasts for a reason, right? They're celebration. They're let's remember, let's do this to remember. And so although I don't want to focus on those, I kind of wanted to start off with that because it sets us up recognising that God is into feasts and banquets and tables. Because, I mean, they may have sat on the floor, but it was already been round a table of some kind. But also those feasts, Jesus actually fulfilled the meaning of all those feasts when he was here on earth too, which is very cool. It's a cool study. I'm going to actually spend a bit more time digging into it. But you know what? In our culture, in our society, I don't think we do feasts well. I don't think we do banquets. I was thinking about this. Emma and I went to see Downton Abbey the other day, which was very fun. And back then, the rich people got formally dressed for dinner. And I mean like pearls and gloves and the whole shebang, just to go to dinner. You like that? I mean, that's hectic. What that says to me, though, is that this is an important thing that we're doing. We're actually getting dressed up, being part of something that is worthwhile being part of. And it made me think, although, obviously it's over the top. We look at it now and think it's over the top. But what it made me think was how things have changed. We're lucky if we actually even sit at a table for dinner these days. It's so different. And yet what it said to me was they saw that dinner space as a space to connect with the family, to have conversation, to go over what's going on in the day or what's happening in the week. And they took it seriously because they dressed for the occasion. I found that really challenging. It wasn't just, oh, that's a nice movie. It was actually something that spoke to me about the importance of that meal around a table. So Jesus is all about the table. He's all about tables. When I did a little bit I was looking into this and I was thinking, okay, what is this about tables and you, Jesus? So we've got Matthew 26, the Last Supper. And we are actually going to have communion together soon. He gathered with the most intimate of his team around a table. It was his last supper with them before he died. It was intimate. I don't know what was on the table, but it was a meal. We know there was bread and there was wine at least, but I imagine there was a lot more than that too. Matthew 14, Jesus was having dinner at a Pharisee's house, one of the lead Pharisees, around a table with a bunch of people who wanted to trick him, so the table is a place of all sorts of things that can happen around it. They wanted to trick him into saying who he was, and they were trying to get him into trouble. But at that dinner, Jesus had some confronting things to say to them. He talked to them about humility and fighting for position. So he was using the table as a space to speak into things that were not right. Confronting. He didn't hide what he was saying to them. They were all like, I want to be at the head of the table, I want to be the important one. And Jesus is like, that's not it. Go sit on the far end of the table. If you get moved up by somebody that's hosting you, great. But you take the lowest seat. Because they were all jostling. All the Pharisees were like, I'm the most important. Matthew 9. Matthew's house. He went to Matthew's house and he was sitting around with sinners and tax collectors. That's what the Bible tells us. I think that's a table he loved to sit around. I think he probably preferred that table to the Pharisees' table, the religious people. He's not about religion at all. So he sat around that table with people who were hungry to hear, who didn't fully understand who he was, but they wanted to be around him. I would have liked to have sat around that table. Matthew 21, Jesus turned the tables upside down. He had no hesitation getting rid of the tables that were actually offending and didn't belong there and were not kingdom-minded. He tossed those tables out of the way. How good is that? Luke 19, Zacchaeus' house. I mean, I will talk about Zacchaeus till I have my last breath. I think I just love him. I can't wait to meet him. But Jesus said to him, I'm coming to your house. I'm coming to your house. Come down from that tree. Sometimes, I'm going to read it actually. This is what it says because I actually want to... Luke 19:5 says this. When Jesus reached the spot, so he knew he was on mission to find Zacchaeus. When we hear that Jesus was about his Father's business, the Father had already spoken to him about Zacchaeus. There's going to be a guy up a tree. You need to go tell him you're coming to his house. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly, which makes me think that he wasn't that far away from his house. I don't know, we don't give him that narrative. But all the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house. He's in this house. Because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. I believe he was around Zacchaeus' table. I don't think he walked in the front door and that all just happened. I feel like there was conversation, transformation, affirmation. Jesus has those conversations with people. We don't get given that, but that's what I believe. He was sitting around a meal with Zacchaeus and God did something amazing in that space. But it's interesting, today, if somebody says, oh, I'm coming to your house, we would think, how rude are you, thinking you can invite yourself over to my house. We live in this individualistic, self-serving, I'm in my castle, don't touch me, I'm pulling up the drawbridge, this is my space, don't come near. Don't we live in that space? Not us, personally, but our society is like that. My house is my house. But when you think about kingdom, none of what we own is ours. It's all the king's. It's all the king's. And our table is as well. And so I love this. This is good for us to keep being reminded that actually what God gives us in terms of space to be, he wants to use it. He wants to use it for transformation. He wants to use it for conversation, for us being discipled, for us discipling others. And Jesus wants to meet us in our world. That's what he showed us with Zacchaeus. He tells him to come down from the tree because obviously he's like, we could do conversation this way, but actually I want to be around the table with you. He's still saying that to people. I want to be around the table with you. Around that place, I mean, I've only touched on a few tables, but around that space is where disciples were made and multiplication happened. Because what was learnt there went out. If you think about it, how many of you here are parents and you have had conversations with your kids around the table? Yes. Sandy's like, It's a place where you have conversations with your kids, right? It might be that you're talking about their day at school. It might be that you're talking about one of their friends. It is a place for us to teach other people. I'm using kids as an example because, that's just a space that a lot of people get to do that. But actually around a table is where you do life, where you ask questions because you're sitting face to face. I don't know, maybe you've had experience where you've gone to somebody's house for dinner and no one talks, but it's very unusual to not talk and have conversation around a table. And so I love that Jesus is showing us that this is a place that's important to him as well. And so I want to ask you, what does your table look like? What happens around your table? I could answer answers, but I won't. We'll make it rhetorical. But it's a challenge to some degree, because it's like, okay, what do we do with our space? What do we do with the table that we have in our house, in our home? Do we make it accessible? Do we do what Jesus did? Do we sit around with people and have tough conversations? Do we sit around our table and have real conversations? Are we making disciples? It's challenging, hey? It's challenging. But I actually love that it doesn't stay there. It doesn't have to stay there. Because Jesus went where the Father told him to go. So there's no condemnation in this message. This is just, let's keep our ears tuned to see how he wants to use our tables, how he wants to use us around other people's tables. Because some of you might not have space. I know there's some people that live in a tiny space, and they may not be able to have more than a couple of people over. That's fine. But it's also about then what we do with other people's tables and how we sit around that and what we bring to it. So we this Thursday obviously have the table, which I realise that we haven't really spoken about it. We've kind of tacked it on very quickly sometimes to the end of a Sunday. We've gone, oh yeah, the table's coming. And I realise that a lot of people may not even know how this table started or what it's about. And the last 2 years have been really a bit tough with this, because we couldn't do it, or we tried to do it online, and we tried a whole bunch of things. Some of them were great. Some of them were really successful in that we were supporting local businesses, and we connected on Zoom, eating dinner together. I mean, really, you have to get creative, right? But this, and I'm going to embarrass her. She's going to hate it, but I'm going to embarrass her. Emma came up with this. It has evolved, but when we first came to Port, she said, we need somewhere where people can gather. And originally she was talking about the team that came from Sydney. There was 9 of us that came from Sydney to plant the church. And she said that we need to have something where we're gathering around a table to connect and do life together. And we were like, it's a great idea, Emma, great idea. So we started this when there was only just a few of us. And so we've done this. We started off actually, did we start off fortnightly? I think we started off fortnightly. Then we moved it to monthly, because we were like, people live busy lives. But the point of the table is to connect with each other. And we totally get, like the last month's one was poor Karen said, yeah, I'll host it. And then hardly anybody went, I think. And look, this is not law. Please do not hear this as law. But this is an opportunity for us to gather. Jesus said, whenever you get together and you do this, which is literally, can be juice and bread. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be this. It's around a meal. When you are around a meal together, remember me. It's an opportunity for us. We do it here on a Sunday. Here's an opportunity for us in the middle of the week to get together and say to each other, how are you doing? Let's talk about the goodness of God. Let's talk about what he's doing. What's he saying to you? What are we believing for? Let's community dinner together. So we're going to be doing this Thursday at our house, which I know is not brilliant for some, I'm sorry. 6 p.m. The idea is to just bring a plate to share, because then if you bring a plate that's got enough for you and maybe 2 or 3 other people, then there's plenty of food. It's also not just for this group of people. It can be for anybody, okay? So our table, we like to have people around it. We have 2 tables actually, but we want to have people around our table. But not just because we want people around our table, but because that is a place where Jesus moves, Jesus speaks. We have opportunity to encourage each other, to speak into each other's lives, to give God glory for what he's doing. Oh, that's a great thing. Who wants to go anywhere else other than that? I want to be there. I will be there. But let's remember that Jesus is all about tables and banquets. He's about the meals together, because that is the place where he actually can teach us, grow us, stretch us. He can speak into things. It's an intimate place, a place where we do life together. And so I want to encourage you to think about not just Thursday, but also to think about what your table might look like. Who you're inviting around your table. And if you're in a space where it's hectic and busy and you can't have anybody around your table, think about what you can bring to somebody else's table. Maybe you need to be like Jesus and say, I'm coming to your house. Maybe you can change the status quo in this country where you don't do that, because that's not polite. Maybe we need to shake it up a bit. So I want you to be encouraged that Jesus is about banquets. He is about the tables. He is about the feasts, because he is a good God full of provision and love, and he has good things for us. And so we want to banquet together, okay? We want to banquet together. And actually, Dave, can you just come and just play something? And we're just going to, I actually just want us to spend a minute before we go and take communion. Now, and I apologise, this is not, I don't think this meal is what Jesus saw, okay? I don't think this is what Jesus saw. I said to Dave, it's a shame we didn't have time to get a really fancy table with tablecloth and lots of food, and that would have been great, but, anyway. But just maybe use your imagination. Use your imagination and think about, as we share this meal together, what Jesus is saying to us is, I died. I gave up everything for you to have life. When you have this, remember me. Remember what I've done. But also share it together. Jesus said, when you get together, remember me. He didn't say when you're sitting on your own on your couch and you have a bit of bread and wine. He talked about when you get together, remember me. And that's an opportunity for us to speak of the goodness of God. So we're going to just take a minute. I just want us just to sit quietly. I talked to God about the whole table idea. I don't mean the table, I mean the table idea. About what he's saying to you. What he's asking of you. And he might actually be saying, it's okay for you just to sit in the space you're in at the moment. He knows what's going on in your world better than I do. That's why I'm saying there's no judgment or condemnation in this message, because I don't know what you've all got going on, but God knows. So we're just going to sit for a minute, ask him, show me how you want me to use my table, or how I am to go to somebody else's table. And then what I'd love you to do is, if you feel like you want to take up communion for somebody else as well, go and share it with somebody, then feel free. If you feel like you just want to have a moment on your own and you just want to talk to Jesus and thank him, then just feel free to do that. There's space for all of it, okay? Lord, I thank you for in your word there are feasts and banquets and tables throughout the whole of your word that speak of provision, that speak of relationship, that speak of love, that speak of sacrifice. Lord, we want to be people that are following hard after you. We want to represent you well, Jesus. So as we come before this table of sacrifice, as we remember together as you've asked us to do, I ask that you'll speak to our spirit about what our tables look like and what you're asking us to do. I ask that you will clear away anything that says you should. I ask that you will replace it with a love and a desire to create a space for people to minister together, for people to connect, for people to speak of your goodness and your provision, to recognise where you've brought us from and where we're going. A space for life to be spoken and freedom and truth, where your name is lifted up high in the middle of that table. We thank you, Jesus, for your life that made this possible.